Negative Effects of Blind Devotion and Belief by Lars B IMP. So first, what is blind devotion? Well, blind devotion is a blind following of a religion or ideology which lacks critical thinking. How is this developed? It's developed through confirmation bias on the individual level, as well as group biases, and also through synchrony in the rituals of the group. According to Sharon Heshmat, PhD from the University of Illinois, with a PhD in managerial economics, confirmation bias occurs from the direct influence of desire on beliefs. When people would like a certain concept to be true, they end up believing it to be true because they are motivated by wishful thinking. This error leads the individual to stop gathering information when the evidence gathered so far confirms the views or prejudices one would like to be true. In other words, confirmation bias causes individuals to cling to their already existing beliefs even when they're confronted with conflicting evidence. This topic can be extrapolated to areas such as religion and political ideology, which are both some very controversial areas of thought. This also relates to my topic because it stops people from seeing the full view of the topic and gaining insight into other opinions. And if they were able to gain insight into these other opinions, they might even change their opinion. But instead, confirmation bias perpetuates blind devotion. Now for some effects on the individual from the group. The first effect is in-group bias. According to the American Psychological Association, in-group bias is the tendency to favor one's own group, its members, its characteristics, and its products, particularly in reference to other groups. According to Daniel R. Stalder, PhD, a social psychologist from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, a 2003 study titled Privacy Over Policy showed that liberal college students changed their tune about a generous welfare policy when they were told it was supported by congressional Republicans, but not Democrats. This shows that a statement is highly dependent on who is saying it, rather than the idea that's actually being pointed out. And this is very highly related to my topic because it perpetuates blind devotion, because there's the in-group and there's the out-group. And all the opinions of the in-group are accepted by the individual, and all the opinions of the out-group are automatically rejected. And this can lead to a discriminatory mindset in some cases. But this is part of a larger phenomenon called groupthink. According to Cambridge University, groupthink is the process by which bad decisions are made by a group because its members do not want to express opinions or suggest new ideas that others may disagree with. This can be dangerous because if the individual is too afraid to point out what they think is wrong with the group activity, then the group will never change, and then bad actions will continue. And that's shown in this picture where the man doesn't really know why he's there, but he's just following along with what everybody else is doing. The final way that unethical behavior or negative behavior is promoted through groupthink is the bandwagon effect. According to the American Psychological Association, the bandwagon effect is the tendency for people in social and sometimes political situations to align themselves with the majority opinion and do or believe things because many other people appear to be doing or believing the same. This can be problematic because the thing that's being popularized may not actually be something that's ethical at all, but it's always going to reel some percentage of the population in because otherwise it wouldn't be popularized in the first place. Now for some examples of effects on the individuals from the group. According to Dr. Patrick Mahaney Clark from the University of Scranton, who has a PhD in theology and religious studies, on November 18, 1978, members of the People's Temple, led by activist Jim Jones, committed suicide in the Guyanan jungles. Most died by voluntarily drinking cyanide-laced Kool-Aid, which was attributed to the destructive effects of brainwashing. Jim Jones, according to the San Diego State University, was widely known as a communist, and his town, with all of his followers, which was called Jonestown, was heavily influenced by communism and was described by visitors as a slave camp. And this shows ritualistic synchrony within the group. Furthermore, according to Michelle J. Gelfand from the Department of Psychology from the University of Maryland, synchrony promotes conformity, aggression, and destructive obedience. Synchrony, compared with a non-synchrony control activity, made people more likely to comply with an experimenter's request to grind up live pill boats and administer a sound blast to a stranger. In these studies, synchrony promoted obedience, but to aggressive and morally compromising commands. This perfectly explains the Jim Jones massacre, because all of the people who committed suicide by drinking the cyanide-laced drink did this voluntarily from the order of Jim Jones. Finally, according to Rachel Monroe, a writer from Johns Hopkins University and writer for The Atlantic, in an article called Ultra-Fast Fashion is Eating the World, a fashion company called Boohoo had been using unethical practices such as low wages, unsafe working conditions, and contribution to extreme environmental impact. However, once a report was released stating that their practices weren't illegal, investors rose their stock by 21%, even though they knew they were supporting a bad cause in most cases. This fits with the definition of the bandwagon effect, because each individual investor decided to support unethical practices because others were also investing in the company. It can be proven that the support was from the bandwagon effect because that's the way that the stock market works. When people decide to invest in something and others see that the stock is going up, then they will also invest in it. Even if somebody invested in the stock without knowledge of the unethical practices, it still shows harmful effects of the bandwagon effect because they are supporting something popular without knowing the destructive effects that they are really supporting. In conclusion, confirmation bias negatively affects the individual's reasoning process. Group biases, such as in-group bias and the bandwagon bias, can lead to unethical actions and beliefs. And synchrony increases conformity to authority, even if the commands given are unethical. Finally, each of these phenomena perpetuate blind devotion. The solution to this issue, the main solution, is critical thinking. Because if people in problematic groups critically think, then they can realize what they're doing wrong rather than being controlled by biases. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Lars. So did your research go in a different way than you originally expected?
My research didn't go in a different way than I originally expected because first, I was mainly focusing on the effects of the individual from the group. However, it did expand because then I expanded it to the effects on the individual level, and also I put historical examples and the explanations of those.
Okay. And what are the implications of your finding for the community or in the community?
The implications are that some communities are not using critical thinking when they're making decisions, and they incorporate groupthink because members of the community may be afraid to speak up about what they think is wrong. So communities should work to make sure everybody can share their opinion about their opinion about what's happening in the group.
Okay, thank you. All right, and we move on to Braden.
That's my name. So, my presentation.
Okay, wait, let me